This video installation is a tribute to our Locus Awards 2025 finalists in the art category. Take a seat and immerse yourself in the beauty of their work and hear the insights about process and practice in their own words.
I was born in the deep, dark South in the mid-60s. As an Army brat, I spent my entire youth on the move, and I unabashedly blame living in places like Japan, Hawaii, Germany, and Alabama for all my many afflictions. From my earliest memories, I've been obsessed with creating the weird, the monstrous, and the beautiful. At age 20, I began working full-time as a commercial illustrator in Atlanta, Georgia. 3 years later, I finally stepped into the field of fantastic art that I had loved my whole life, making my mark by developing and illustrating for D&D's best-selling role-playing worlds. Since then, I have gone on to lend my distinctive vision to nearly every facet of the creative industries, from novels and games to comics and film, picking up a number of awards along the way, including the Spectrum Fantastic Art Grand Master Award and the Chesley Lifetime Achievement Award. Most recently, I've been creating a series of award-winning horror novels that I both write and illustrate. The Plucker, an adult children's book. The Devil's Rose, a modern western set in hell. The Child Thief, a gritty, nightmarish retelling of the Peter Pan myth. Krampus, the Yule Lord, a tale of revenge between Krampus and Santa, set in rural West Virginia. Lost Gods, one man's determined trek through the brutal landscape of purgatory. Slewfoot, a historical horror novel of witchery and vengeance set in colonial America and a USA Today national bestseller. And my latest, Evil in Me, a punk rock demon possession fairy tale. These days I'm kept in a dank cellar somewhere in the most haunted city in America, Savannah, Georgia, where I subsist on poison spiders, centipedes, and cheesy horror flicks. When I'm not eating bugs, I'm always writing, painting, and trying to reach a happy sing-along with the many demons dancing about in my head.
I wish I could claim some sort of agency over how I got into fantasy and sci-fi, but the truth is that I was just the youngest of a household full of people that loved books and libraries. So everything was very conveniently available by the time I came along. I loved reading everything my parents and sisters left lying around, but I never really thought it could connect to a career. No one in my family was in the arts, so I think even when I ended up considering applying to an art school, the only two viable art jobs I knew were t-shirt designer or game concept artist. I wasn't the most worldly 18-year-old there ever was. Fortunately, there are more than 2 art jobs in the world. I did end up working in games for a few years, followed by a long decade of corporate illustration work. Somewhere in there, a handful of publishing art directors took a chance at me, and I was able to start making book covers. Reading is still something I do for fun, and I love getting manuscripts with my assignments, as they're probably the largest source of inspiration for my work. It's a fun challenge trying to capture the style of the writing and the art approach. If I can, I also try to incorporate some themes I think the author is trying to touch on in their story, or at least my best interpretation of it. When it comes to personal work, I'm pretty simple. I like making things up, making them strange and colorful and textured. I've heard that I veer a little more into the surreal, but I think that's just because I like imagery you couldn't necessarily find or photograph yourself out in the world. I actually follow a very traditional, straightforward process. Thumbnails, sketches, color draft, final art. And somewhere in there, a lot of breaks, showers, and walks to give my eyes and brain a break. Overall, I'm still stunned and grateful to make the kind of art I make professionally. The industry is changing a lot under our feet right now, but I'm glad to live in a world where people still value expressive, fantastical art.
I'm Kathleen Jennings from Brisbane, Australia. I work primarily in cut paper and pen and ink with digital colour or watercolour over the top of that. My works here include maps, cover art, silhouette illustrations for books and crowd-funded promotions, and personal fairy tale work. When you're little and wish you could climb into books, people tell you to write, which is great, but reading the same manuscript 73 times isn't quite the same thing. Illustrating, however, lets you get into other people's worlds and draw on the walls. So my inspiration is the books themselves, those I illustrate and those I grew up with, and those my friends write. I also really love classic Golden Age and mid-century illustrators and use those styles and references to pluck at the fairy tale and gothic strings that run through so much fantasy and horror.
Hi, I'm Michael Whalen, and I'm sitting here by the side of the road addressing the readers and fans who read Locus. I want to thank you for your support over the years. I've been illustrating fantasy and science fiction for 50 years or more now, and I'm very gratified that I've had the support that I've had that has enabled me to be able to do what I do and get away with it for so long. It's been a wonderful ride, and I hope the fans will continue to follow my work as I go into whatever realms await me in the coming years. One thing I'd say that informs my work more than anything else is my desire to do a cover that you could judge a book by. And I hope if I've done that, at least a portion of my work, then I'll feel like I've been successful in my choice of a career. And I hope others feel that way about my work. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that Locus continues to be the beacon of information that science fiction fans turn to when they want to find out what's going on in our field. Thanks a lot, and have a great year. Bye.
Hello, this is Sean Tan from Melbourne, Australia. It's a great honour to be a Locus finalist this year, and to say a little bit about myself, I cut my teeth working for small press SF magazines that were accessible in Perth, Western Australia in the early 90s, particularly Eidolon and Aurealis. I owe much of my illustration career in this genre to the great editors of these magazines such as Dirk Strasser and Jonathan Strahan, willing to take a punt on a novice, and the mentorship of Nick Stathopoulos, people of the tribe whom many of you will know. This seems like a lifetime ago and also only yesterday. I met so many terrific writers and illustrators here, bumbling my way through weird short stories and budget printing. I was also fortunate to be a finalist in the L. Ron Hubbard Illustrators of the Future contest back in '92, and upon meeting other professionals in this field realised that SF illustration was an actual job. It's something people did for money, albeit not without difficulty. I remember fondly the dire warnings of the art life given by seasoned illustrators to this hapless 18-year-old from suburban Western Australia. I later picked up some covers for Sarah Douglas novels which paid the rent, enough for me to pursue a questionable career in picture book illustration. My first success came with The Rabbits, with the late great John Marsden, about an alternate colonial Australia which first gained critical attention in the SF and F community, while the puzzled children's literature community debated whether it was suitable for children. It was actually banned in some Australian schools while the Mexican government bought 30,000 copies. Many years later it was embraced as a classroom standard, and this has cemented my belief that books for young people should withhold none of the complexity and conceptual challenge that we find in adult science fiction and fantasy. The rest is an easy summary. 25 years of writing and illustrating strange picture books with a little animated film theatre and TV on the side. If there's one thing I've learned in all that time, it's just this. The stuff that interests me as a human also happens to interest other humans. Who would have guessed? As professional writers and illustrators, all we need to do is build the stage, set up a few props, some nicely crafted cues and lighting, put a little coloured mud on wood pulp. The reader, unsung creative genius that they are, will always take care of the rest.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Law, and I am a watercolor artist from Oakland, California. When I'm asked where my inspiration comes from, the answer is primarily from three sources. First is a strong mythological core. Chinese mythical creatures, stories of folk heroes and gods were a favorite of mine growing up. And some of my earliest mythological inspirations were from the everyday stories that my parents and grandparents would tell me during our holidays and celebrations. This led me into an interest in mythology of other cultures and discovering the rich tapestry that the tales wove of our shared human experience. Nature is a core inspiring element to my visuals as well. I love the patterns and rhythms found in growth and decay, the colors and shapes and forms. I'm constantly finding fascinating elements to pull from my surroundings and weave into my art, both in my botanical art studies and in the extrapolation of those forms into more fantastical imagination. And lastly, dance. Not necessarily in literal form of dancing human figures, but in movement and constant flow and composition in my pieces. I don't see images in my mind that I translate to paper, but instead I feel my art viscerally in my body before it ever takes form on the page. These are the three elements that I weave into my artwork.